Meta's not guilty, Google's ad tech fate is in Judge Brinkema's hands, and GDPR could be getting a facelift. That's what we're covering on this week's The Refresh, your weekly download on what went down in advertising. And if you like staying up to date with ad industry news but are tight on time, this is for you. So let's get into it. First, let's talk about Meta, who was officially declared not guilty in the antitrust case that was brought against it by the FTC, who alleged that Meta was able to hold an illegal monopoly thanks to its acquisitions of Instagram and WhatsApp back in 2012 and 2014. The slight irony here is that the FTC at the time gave these deals their blessing to move forward. They then sued Meta in 2020, bringing us to the case that we're talking about today. The FTC was ultimately unable to make a sufficient case that Meta was holding an illegal monopoly within a marketplace of social apps like Snapchat, an obscure app called MeWe, TikTok, and YouTube. This verdict reinforces that Meta, like Google in its search antitrust case, is benefiting from a regulatory environment that's moving far too slowly to keep pace with the technological landscape that's rapidly evolving and bringing what the courts view as viable competition along with it. Moving on, closing arguments in Google v. DOJ, aka the AdTech antitrust trial, were held on Friday, closing out the saga that began in September of 2024. Or at least this phase of the trial, because Google is expected to appeal. A quick recap, back in April, Judge Brinkema ruled that Google was holding an illegal monopoly in both its ad exchange and ad server businesses. Then earlier this fall, she heard the remedies phase of the trial, or how each side proposed to resolve these monopolies. Google took more of a behavioral remedies approach, while the DOJ took more of a structural approach, including the forced divestiture of AdX, Google's ad exchange. During closing arguments, Judge Brinkema indicated that if a forced sale of AdX was going to occur, it would need to happen quickly given Google's plan to appeal the decision. There are many reasons Google would want to appeal the decision, with the most recent taking the form of lawsuits from major ad tech players like Magnite, OpenX, and PubMatic. If the verdict stands and Google is forced into some sort of remedial action in this case, it could be applied to these other cases. Other elements in this case that remain unclear for now is who would actually be able to reasonably or realistically buy AdX, and whether or not Google and the DOJ will ultimately settle. Judge Brinkema said that she and her team have already begun working on a decision and plan to release that sometime next year. Finally, the European Commission is proposing some pretty significant changes to key privacy and tech legislation, including GDPR and the AI Act. The changes are being proposed under what's being dubbed the Digital Omnibus and would do things like make it easier for companies to share anonymized and pseudonymized data. They would also simplify cookie permission pop-ups, in part by downgrading certain types of cookies to non-risk, and allow users to control their cookie preferences from a centralized hub that would apply more broadly across websites. When it comes to AI, the amendments would see Europe taking a looser or more deregulatory approach to AI regulation, including delaying or downgrading certain elements of the AI Act. These proposed changes largely reflect the mentality of the US and big tech companies that view red tape and rigid limitations on things like data access and tech development as prohibitive and harmful to the advancement of new technologies like AI. Another argument is that more red tape makes compliance for smaller organizations difficult to achieve. That's all for today. Thanks for joining us for The Refresh, and we'll catch you next time.